It's Dean here. Yes, your friendly neighbourhood naturopath in Bulla. You just visited me recently. Now, I took the liberty of checking in to your situation regarding your situation around here that you wanted to clear. Now, so here's a little bit of a presentation summarising what I came up with. All right, so bear with me and we'll go through it, okay? Right, so here's what I like to call this is basically a consciousness audit. Okay, so the way I see things in terms of our health is that we create, or we perpetuate the situation, and that leads to usually some sort of energy imbalance or blockage. And if left unresolved for X period of time, eventually dissolves or degenerates into some level of symptom. Okay, now that may or may not be like a repetitive type situation, year after year. It could just be a chronic type of illness that you can't seem to shake. However, or whatever the situation is, this is the way I like to look at it, and we can clear these things up energetically. The downstream effect is that physically we usually see some sort of change, positive change that is. So you'll see here, I like to call this a consciousness audit. And as a little bit of a preview, basically what we've got here is we've got something that happened early on in your childhood that set up some level of omnipresent conditioning. In other words, beliefs or constructs that perhaps are having some sort of detrimental effect on the way that you're behaving in your life, perhaps not really for your highest good, and as a result creates energetic disturbance. This then results in some sort of behavior, and I'll go into that or elaborate on that more shortly. It also has an effect on your chakra system, right? You'll see I've written here Tishratil. That basically means the third eye. And then I'll give you a little bit of a relationship to how we might deal with that, practically speaking, all right, in terms of the practical spirituality ramifications. Okay, so what I came up with was something around the age of 7, right? And now it was in relation to a particular situation, not necessarily a specific person per se, be it a mother or a father, etc., but just a situation. Sometimes we identify or we create beliefs or constructs around a particular situation rather than actually a blame around or towards a particular person. So there's no blame involved. It's just associated with something that you observed, and then as a result you created a belief or a condition accordingly. All right, so I like to call these beliefs some sort of conditioning, and they may not be serving us right for our highest good. It seems that our perception of events or whatever took place in our life at that point further colours the way we perceive or perceive our life as a result of that belief. In other words, we create what we think is our own truth accordingly moving forward. And in any case, there are ways to sort of heal this. It can either be through forgiveness or some sort of psychological reenactment. All right, so before we move on, have a think about age 7 and what that may have been, and perhaps you can contemplate whatever came up for you when you reflected back upon that time and see how it relates or not to the rest of this information. All right, so this conditioning, initially what I discovered, it related to actually your need to fix stuff, okay? So that may relate to either needing to fix ourselves, in other words, never being happy with the way we look, the way we feel, the way we act, how physically fit we are, anything along those lines, right? Or it could relate to others, like in other words, we have judgment around people's behaviours. In other words, it's not right unless it's done our way. Or it could be in relation to particular situations, okay, be that at work or in your personal life. Now, this could be in relation to your relationship, your finances, your work, health, or creativity. So as you contemplate this idea, particularly around age 7, and how this whole fix-it concept comes together, see what comes forward, in relation to any of those areas of your life. So one of the ways you can actually recognize this is take a look at where you're experiencing most of your problems, where you experience most of your conflict, okay? Is that in your personal life? Is it in your relationships with yourself or others? Or is it in your work? Or is it some other aspect you perhaps haven't considered yet? All right, so take a look at that. Balancing or dissolving such conditioning just requires really a shift in attention, right, towards loving yourself and trusting the universe will provide for you whatever it is that you need or desire. Now, there is one caveat here, and that is that it's got to be for the highest good. So if we're talking about fixing it, usually one of the clues for us is, stepping in and, let's say, having an opinion or trying to change something without actually being asked. Okay, so sometimes when we have a discussion, or you might witness, someone comes to you with a very stern opinion, and they don't actually ask you for any feedback. Until they do, you're basically asked to really just be quiet or sit silent. Right, because if you have a difference of opinion, that usually generates into an argument, which really is another way of just trying to fix something. Okay, it's like, I'm going to fix this. They're going to understand my point of view no matter what. All right. Now, I'm not talking about don't have healthy debate. It's only when our emotions get involved from the needing to fix, it becomes a problem. All right, so let's move on. However, getting back to the reason why we sometimes do this is because the original trauma has been such that there's hurt, right? There's some sort of hurt, which may, in your case, result into taking let's just say, a position of indifference. All right. So, and this might just be indifference within you. However, outwardly, it's like an indifference. So I guess you could say, when you look at an aspect of yourself, you might be like, oh yeah, whatever. Okay, I'm okay there. But actually you're not. However, you do it. You try and create some feeling or some loving outwardly by fixing it or going through some sort of control. All right, so you see I've suggested here that conditioning previously mentioned may be something to consider here. Right, so the need to fix may suggest that you believe the subject needs to move in another direction. Okay, suggesting that the current situation is stagnant and requires change. Right, so this can be within or it can be without. Right, you might think that it lacks development, perhaps it's not very advanced or progressive in nature, maybe even is sluggish or dull. I mean, we're essentially just describing this idea of stagnant. Okay, so you can think of it as like a pond where there's no movement of fresh water in or out, so it's just stale. Okay, so change, if we're to change something, that requires movement. However, sometimes we don't move or change because that requires effort. And perhaps whatever the hurt is that took place in the original trauma has dictated to us on some level that it's not worth changing because we deserve where we're at. Okay. The only problem here is that as a result, this compromises our ability to perceive. In other words, our ability to become aware of what's actually going on around us. Sometimes it blinds us to possibilities. All right. And at the very worst, so this is like a bit of a numb state, okay, but at the very worst can turn us into like unfeeling, okay, where we don't get to experience any feelings whatsoever. On the opposite side, if we were to balance all this out, perhaps we would increase our ability to perceive or to become more perceptive. So perceptive means the ability or the faculty of perceiving. In other words, your ability to harness like insight, understanding, or intuition. So perhaps if that part of you is a little bit dead, that may require a little bit of perhaps training or contemplation or further investigation. But most likely it is dead because it's being covered up by this need to actually fix based on the trauma originally at 7. Okay. So, perception or understanding or intuition usually is facilitated through identifying something through your senses, not necessarily through seeing or hearing or tasting or smelling, etc., but just through that sixth sense of intuition. And when that happens, when that actually is functioning properly, it leads this ability to appreciate. Okay, so that's the capacity to properly feel. Okay, so often when we have some experience that's hurtful in our nature, that part of us that is hurt at the time usually is locked away so it can't be hurt again. So that's what we're talking about here. In your case, that area has become stagnant and perhaps you've lost the ability to perceive in some way, shape or form. All right, it's also basically, so we sort of expand upon this further and we can see here that it's actually affecting our third eye or tistrotil. So we're largely relating this to the upper part of the third eye, okay, where humility is the thing that keeps things healthy. Now, based on what we've said so far, if you're trying to fix stuff, right, usually we're trying to do that not out of humility but out of righteousness. Okay, so that's the opposite of keeping the third eye healthy. Now, be that through communicating an opinion or perhaps trying to get someone to do it your way, or perhaps they're doing something around you that's not the way you would do it. Anytime that we have judgment over something like that, we're moving out of this humble state and affecting the balance of our third eye. So in contrast, as I mentioned, out of righteousness, glory is the thing that actually makes trouble here. Okay, so it's like the need for recognition, and this can give us like trouble in the eyes, throat, or frontal cortex or upper teeth. Okay, so this is where we sort of give energy out, not for the recognition, but simply because we believe in what we say or what we do. All right. So what we're sort of seeing here as a theme, particularly around the third eye and the throat, there's a relationship to communication. Okay, so there may be difficulty here around communication, perhaps doubting yourself or not knowing how to best communicate with others or even yourself in certain situations. Okay, so perception can sometimes be regarded as a way of communication within. So it's your ability to perceive inwardly to perceive what's going on outwardly. All right. And lastly here, from a practical spirituality standpoint, perhaps, revolving back to the need to fix it initially, this may be pointing us to something more specific around communication relating to psychic blackmail or control, right? So this can happen in two ways. So maybe we're talking about someone close to you or people close to you, all right? You can be on the receiving end, that is, you create, you allow, or you perpetuate this situation based on your beliefs discussed earlier. Or you can actually be the perpetrator, that is an attempt to control another person, be it through communication or movement, in an attempt to feel secure. So perhaps I'm getting a feeling in this case that you're more the former, right? So perhaps you're on the receiving end. So perhaps you feel a little bit controlled in relation to some of the things you like to involve yourself in, primarily because others are lacking some level of security and they try and create that through your company or something along those lines. All right. So the key here is to effectively recognise, how that perhaps is playing out in your life. So here's a little bit of a summary, and it's effectively like a dog chasing its tail. But the significant thing here is the mirror in the middle here, right? So you've got the belief, which is this resulting in this need to control or fix a single or multiple aspects of your environment. I'll suggest that it's probably just maybe a relationship with, important person in your life. And then on the other side, you've got this allowing yourself to be controlled. So they need to work together because they don't exist in isolation. So there'll be aspects of both of these in your life, in the belief sector and in the learn sector here. But ultimately, the most important part here is that it goes back to this issue around 7. All right, so you can start working with this, these areas of, becoming more attuned in terms of paying attention to or training your attunement. In other words, your ability to perceive, through trusting your ability to be humble in communication. However, ideally, it's paying attention to becoming more aware of how you fix, or how you like to fix things in your life, or how you like to be fixed, or how you like to be controlled, in contrast. And this all goes back to this childhood trauma. So if we're going to deal with that, effectively what we want to do is some level of forgiveness and or reenactment. It's quite simple, really, just to rechange this circuit. But you'll find from a, just as an added extra, from a subconscious or unconscious point of view, all of this stuff that we've discussed here revolves around the unconscious, revolves around in the unconscious and throws out like a hook and can juxtapose itself on any and all situations that pop up in your life from this day forward, right? So not making any sense whatsoever. So the key is to deal with the initial time and heal it. And then, like in timeline therapy, that takes care of every incident moving forward. Anyway, listen, I hope that's been helpful for you, and if you want to sort of talk to me about that any further, please give me a call or email me, and we'll discuss what you might be able to do. In the meantime, pay more attention to those areas we discussed, and perhaps you've got some of your own healing techniques you may be able to do instead. Until I talk to you again, good luck with all your herbs, and talk to you soon.